because we like to stay in control of things, because that's what we are as animals. We like to be certainty, we like to have certainty, and in a difficult conversation we lose that control. So we try and avoid something that makes us feel uncomfortable, that a difficult conversation can do when we lose that control. But I have the antidote for that, and you actually have the antidote already, and that's about proactively using choices that give you back control and influence. And this list is obviously not exhaustive. I think I did it with a group once. We came up with 70 reasons why you don't like difficult conversations. And just to prove my point, we came up with a countermeasure for every single one. You control or influence almost everything in a difficult conversation. You can't control someone's emotions, but you can influence them. We know a lot more about the people we're talking to than we give ourselves credit for. We make choices around difficult conversations before, during and after every conversation we have. So I want you to be a lot more conscious of the choices you make around difficult conversations, and if you can make them deliberately, that will give you back more, be able to manage the situation by feeling more in control, which is the underlying reason we don't like it. So when we talk about the choices that we make, I'm going to give you a scenario so that we can have a look at this and then we'll unpack it. So you receive a formal bullying complaint about a senior manager. Your relationship with him is patchy as you've disagreed in the past. You're concerned about his emotional response. Have the conversation. What choices do we start to make? Not what do you do, because everyone goes, I know what you do. Your brain starts thinking about it, but what are the choices you make here that could reduce the difficultness, the degree of difficultness in this? Who's got an idea? Yes?
I always go into those with being clear on my intent.
Beautiful. I love that. Being very clear on my intent and even sharing it.
Yeah.
Because some people who have a clear intent don't actually share it. And that's one of the things we talk about is the intention you have and how you get that impact. Beautiful. One more. What other choice would you make here? Just yell it out. We're all friends.
Preparation as you're going in, having notes so you can stay on track.
Preparation. So preparation is a really interesting one. A choice for you to prepare, but also do you give them the choice? Do you give them the option of preparing? That's a choice you make. Or do you want them to not know what the topic's going to be and just put them on the spot? There might be a reason for that. I would argue most of the time there's not, but there might be. So this is a choice you make. So I want you to have lots and lots and lots of choices in your heads. We're not going to go through this, and this is not an exhaustive list, but I want you to know that you have choices, because the more choices you know you have, the more control you feel, or the more you can influence a situation. So there's lots of choices we make in these, and I guess the question is, what do you do to allow that a tough conversation you can approach with empathy? One I'd like to point out that I'd love HR people to really make sure we do better is positive problem solving. So one of the things that we do is often, this comes from interest-based negotiation, but one of the things that we do is someone will bring us a problem and we'll deal with it quickly because we've got lots on our plate, and this isn't one of my core jobs. Like, I'm meant to be doing the stuff on my balanced scorecard, so when someone brings a conflict, I want to deal with it quickly. But I'll use an analogy to talk you through the thinking here. So let's pretend you're a parent and you have an orange, and you have two kids and they both want the orange. What do? Cut it in half. And if you're a sophisticated parent, you'll let one kid cut it and the other kid can choose which half they want, right? And you go, that's good, everyone's happy, everyone's got half an orange, that seems fair, let's move on. But then you actually find out that neither child is happy. One would like to make a cake, and half the rind from a cake is not going to make it a very tasty cake. And the second child is thirsty, and half an orange is not going to quench their thirst. So all of a sudden, that deal you had, which seemed fair, you suddenly go, not so fair anymore. Not so, we can do better than that, can't we? I've now shared their interests, what can we do? One has the inside, one has the outside, what else? One's thirsty? Get them to have a different sort of drink. What sort of parent lets their kid drink juice in this day and age, right? What else could we do? Buy more oranges. What else could you do? Make a different flavoured cake. Chocolate's much better than orange. Great. So there's a whole, literally in 30 seconds there, or even 20, you've come up with 5 solutions, right? So one of the things that we don't want to do when we want to be deliberate in our choices, let's not cut that orange in half, let's actually engage in positive problem solving, which allows us to really understand the interests and then come up with the best solutions that suit the situation we're dealing with. We really want to make sure that we do that. And the choices that we give people and the choices we give ourselves can be really big or really small. I do a little bit of work for Defence. They have a program where members who suffered abuse whilst in service can meet with senior members of Defence, talk about their story and have it acknowledged. It's a very, very special work to be involved in. But one of the choices we give complainants is, should the Defence rep come in uniform or should they be in civil clothes? Now that is, it sounds like something very small, but it's a huge choice and it really sets the tone of the conversation you're going to have. Now, I'm not suggesting in your workplaces you talk about what sort of clothes people are going to wear to their difficult conversation, but we do make choices about how the room's set up, about who attends. Even in the scenario I spoke about, maybe you're not the person to have that conversation with that senior manager. Maybe you just need to make sure that conversation's had, but if you don't have a great relationship, it doesn't have to be you. So we want to make sure that we're conscious of making these choices and not making things worse. Choices reduce the drama. Be deliberate, because this is actually the art and science of having a difficult conversation. If you can actually sense in yourself you're avoiding a conversation, or you're coaching someone, a supervisor or someone around, and you can sense that they're avoiding it, talk about what they're avoiding and come up with a countermeasure. Use one of those choices to help them work through it, because that's how we'll get them actually participating and doing better. So I have 3 take-homes for you today. Although we could really talk about this topic for a lot longer, obviously. It's one of those topics that keeps going and keeps giving and giving. My first is that conflict is more positive than you think. We've all participated in difficult conversations that after them, things have actually got better. We need to change our mindset around conflict. Conflict is normal. And conflict actually breeds new ideas, and lets people speak their minds. So let's embrace conflict differently and actually see it as more positive than it is. My second take home to you, please, is be really creative in the way you address a dynamic. Don't just blindly walk into an investigation. There are so many different things we can do. We're seeing an increase in health checks, so that's when you know there's something going on in an area but you're not quite sure. There might be an indicator or two that something's going on. You send someone in to analyse the situation by speaking to lots of people and coming back with a diagnosis and giving you some recommendations on how to deal with it. Tomorrow I'm actually spending the day with an action learning team, facilitating a team at a university who has seen constantly over the last 5 years an increase in the number of complaints or grievances around how lectures are allocated. And so what we're doing this year is proactively sitting down with the group to actually nut out that process in advance. To me, that's a conflict resolution skill. It's a proactive skill. It's taken them 5 years, as well as 3 lecturers not turning up for the first week of university, but that's okay. Be creative in what we're doing. We are also loving working with some organisations who are quite progressive in their thinking around restorative justice and how they can use that as a way of actually strengthening and resolving relationships. We're working with a well-known organisation that has changed its thinking around what it wants its employment relationships to be. They did an investigation a few years ago and nothing was founded, and the woman who complained has spent the last 3 years with deep scars in the organisation. It came about in another way, it was raised, and the Director of Operations actually met with her to hear her story and talk her through that situation. The amount of turnaround that's occurred in that space is incredible, including her disclosing to the director that she was suicidal and she'd written a suicide note that blamed work. So organisations who are thinking about the dynamic, thinking through their options, being creative with how they can resolve things are going to nail this space. And my third take home is that if these skills are things that you need, think through what you actually want to gain in your skills or in your teams and work on them proactively before you need them, because that'll make a huge difference. So again, I do love working with HR teams. We run a number of public courses and also just working in-house with HR teams to upskill them about these things around their mindset, their confidence, credibility and capability in dealing with conflict. So I hope that in this half an hour I have provoked and prodded and pushed you to see conflict in a different way and to approach your difficult conversations balancing that empathy and risk, or that relationship and risk, to see this a bit differently. If you do want to stay in touch, please get in touch on LinkedIn, or we have a blog. I'd be more than happy to grab your card and add you to our list. I'm not sure if we have time for questions. Do we have some time?
Yes.
We do